Hey everyone, welcome to another Third Apron podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Goslin. It's been a little while. Usually end of August, early September is vacation time, not much to talk about. And me and Sam just kind of took it a little easy, but we're back now. And we just got rocked with one of the biggest potential scandals in NBA history, at least recent history last week. We've had almost a week for this to settle now. The Los Angeles Clippers are under investigation for potential salary cap circumvention, which would be one of the biggest infractions. Well, I guess it'd be more than an infraction, practically a felony in sports terms. So I'm going to recap everything. A lot has happened in the past week, but I just want to get everybody, just put everything in, just trying to get everything like in order. So yeah, about a week ago, Pablo Torre on his show, Pablo Torre Finds Out, reported that Kawhi received $28 million for a no-show endorsement deal from a company called Aspire. They do some tree planting. And that Steve Ballmer reportedly invested about like $50 million or so into this company. Then the next day, Boston Sports Journal reported that an additional $20 million in stock was also issued to Kawhi. So that essentially kind of matches that $50 million investment. Then the company went bankrupt earlier this year, which is why this information is now out in discovery. The owner pled guilty to wire fraud of up to $248 million.
The owner of Aspiration, to be clear, not the Clippers.
Oh, yeah. Aspiration's the name of the company. So while team-sponsored endorsements aren't unusual, it's mostly just the how big the money is going to Kawhi that's promised that's unusual, and also the fact that he didn't do any work for it. And in comparison, there were some other celebrities that actually did do some work, further sponsorship deals with this company, and got like a fraction, like very minimal amount for their time. And so that's basically where everything, that's all the suspicion, and that's where everything is. All the alarms were being raised because of the size and the lack of work done. So the NBA immediately they launched an investigation. They put one of the top firms in the U.S. on the case, and they've done a lot of work with them, like on the Sun Sarver case, a couple other big ones that they've done recently. The Clippers have denied committing cap circumvention, and now here we are in this gray area where there isn't anything that it can definitively prove that they circumvented the cap. At the same time, they also haven't exactly proven that they didn't. And now we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. I'm sure we're going to be getting more updates. Pablo did hint that as soon as that episode came out, that a lot more people that are either involved or know of the situation are coming to him. So we're going to get more information, I'm sure. But that's everything we know as of now. And I think the first thing I want to start is on the timeline of all of this. We can look at the other most recent significant cap circumvention case, which was Joe Smith in 2000. And when that happened, it was pretty quick. And the reason for that was that there was something that proved that they did. They had something they had in writing, basically. That's from what I understand. So it got resolved pretty quickly. The penalties were laid out, suspensions were laid out, loss of draft picks were laid out. So, I mean, where do you think how long do you think this could potentially drag out?
I would imagine this is going to be a very long investigation. They're not going to want to have the appearance, because one of two things is going to happen, right? Either they're going to find a smoking gun relatively quickly. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, we'll presumably hear about it pretty soon, and this thing will snowball. But if they don't, I don't think they're going to want to give the appearance that this was a, rushed investigation, that they left any stones unturned. In which case, I expect this to be a pretty lengthy and significant investigation. I've seen people, raised the thought of punishments coming before the season. That seems very, very unlikely to me, whether that's the voiding of the contract or penalties to the Clippers, anything like that. I would be absolutely stunned if, say, Kawhi Leonard was made a free agent before opening night. That I don't think is realistically plausible. I suspect this is something that will take several months to figure out, probably into the season, relatively deep. And I hate being the guy on a podcast who says this, but there's just so much that we don't know. And I don't necessarily mean about the case because Pablo Torre's reporting was so extensive. What I mean is we know so little about how the NBA wants and plans to attack a case like this. Where is the bar, right? Do we need an actual smoking gun? Do we need something in writing that says Steve Ballmer knew about this or somebody employed by the Clippers knew about this? Because I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that something like that is going to be hard to come by. Or is the bar lower? Can we get enough circumstantial evidence that suggests there is no other explanation for what has seemingly transpired here that makes sense? Therefore, we're either going to move to find you guilty or we're going to put the onus on you, the Clippers, to prove that you're not. I know the language in the CBA, and it's a little. Zach Lowe has done a very good job of laying out what the CBA actually says. And there is language in the CBA that essentially says if there is no other explanation for this than cap circumvention, we can essentially treat it as cap circumvention. Doing that, like having that in the CBA, having that language available, and actually acting on it, I think are two very different things. It's a very, very complicated situation because, on the one hand, you have 29 owners here right now that are sitting around thinking, were we cheated? Were we playing an unfair game against an owner who has far more means than we do, who might have the money independently to buy the entire league? Are we playing an unfair game here? We want to get to the bottom of this. But on the other end, I think the NBA understands that this is kind of a dangerous thread to pull at, right? I'm not talking about the whole, oh, owners are worried that maybe if they uncover what the Clippers did, the league will find out all the nefarious things they're doing. That's not what I'm talking about. I think that angle has been kind of overplayed. But if you start ruling on what sponsors are and aren't allowed to do, number one, the Players Association is going to give you all sorts of grief because they don't want the league getting in the way of the money that the players can make off the court. And number two, you risk alienating some sponsors because I promise you, sponsors do not want the league looking into their financial activities or risking anything that they're doing getting uncovered. That might not have anything to do with cap circumvention. That's just common enterprise, right? Where you don't want to give away what you're doing. You don't want to disclose information that you don't have to disclose. There are a lot of tentacles here. And as a non lawyer, I am very hesitant to say I expect this to happen or I expect that to happen. All I really feel comfortable saying at this point is that it is probably going to take a long time. If you want my personal belief, I find Pablo Torre's reporting to be, if not convincing, at least it makes sense. The pieces that he laid out do make sense to me. But there's just a really big difference between thinking somebody did something or proving that somebody did something. And I just have a hard time believing, at least right now, that they're going to be able to come up with something that proves something definitive. So I think this is going to be a long time. I think the NBA wants to make sure that anything they can investigate, any stone they can turn, they're going to do so. But I think anybody expecting relatively soon a resolution, that's just unrealistic to me.
So I want to preface whoever just tuned in. We're talking about the Clippers cap circumvention part, and we are not going to really get into the legalities. That is basically like 95% of discussion going on right now. There's a lot of other good podcasts, a lot of other good websites you can go to read about that because, yes, that is the focus right now. But as far we want to talk, we're going to be talking about more about like how this could actually impact the Clippers, depending on all the different types of scenarios that can happen. And in this case, the timeline really does matter because right now we are about what 5 weeks away from the start of the NBA season, which is like a pretty good amount of time. To it's like just a good amount of time, and it feels like there's an expectation among fans that there will be some type of resolution because it's kind of hard to fathom the league wanting to go into the season with this cloud hovering over the league's head. But there is no quote unquote smoking gun. There is nothing definitive that proves that the Clippers have that they actually did this. So to your point, yeah, unless something does come out within the next few weeks, I think we're gonna have to be prepared for the reality that the Clippers are just gonna be going business as usual, which is gonna be kind of weird. And I haven't really seen anybody raise that possibility. So I'm with you. I don't think that we're going to be having a quick resolution soon. Maybe we do get that smoking gun within the next few weeks. At the same time, this is, no matter what, really bad optics. And I think most people looking at this, like you said, it all makes sense. Like, I'm inclined to believe that, yeah, this, based on what we know and the money involved, how big it is, how Ballmer invests in this company, like it adds up. So I'm inclined to believe, yeah, they probably did something. That's just my opinion. And that's a very wide held belief around the league right now. And as long as all the other owners are pretty upset right now, and they're all probably going to be they've been putting pressure on the league to do something, to investigate. I guess the only other thing is, well, with how much does the NBA want this to linger? Could they potentially push to settle something somehow early, which it doesn't seem like the Clippers are inclined to do right now. So we'll see what Pablo or anyone else can report. But either way, like the more stuff that comes out, it just makes it worse. Like today, we got a really nice report from Bruce Arthur of the Toronto Star. Did you see this, Sam?
Yes. Some of this had made it out in recent days. So I think this was the most exhaustive reporting on the conversations that allegedly took place between Kawhi's uncle, Dennis Robertson, and the Raptors. And just to add to this, there hasn't been the same immediate veracity of reporting, but there's been a lot of buzz around the Lakers as well, who did meet with Kawhi in 2019, that some demands similar to this had been made. Now, by all accounts, neither the Lakers nor the Raptors were interested in cooperating with any of this. The Clippers, I think they were investigated in 2019 and then again in 2020 when I can't remember who it was, but somebody sued Jerry West and sued the team, basically alleging that they had been promised something for helping get Kawhi to the Clippers, and that lawsuit was thrown out. So there have been investigations surrounding the summer of 2019, but I think what Bruce Arthur put out today was the most extensive reporting on the things that Uncle Dennis had asked for. Do you have that list in front of you?
Yes. According to Arthur, the demands made by Leonard's uncle and representative, Dennis Robertson, included $10 million per year in extra sponsorship income. I'm reading the summary on Hoops Rumors. So this is just, there's a lot of new stuff that came out today, and it's just like right in front of me. So I'm using that. So I'm reading off that. But we know also, we've heard about these rumblings. If you've been paying attention to free agency back in 2019, we heard about the notorious Uncle Dennis, and we didn't really know at the time what exactly he was asking for. I think we heard, like, I remember hearing like private travel. I'm not sure if I remember ownership stake or anything like that, but the gist of it is that people got very upset about how that went down. People got very upset with the result of where Kawhi ended up because of the process. And now it's finally coming back. And, you know, this is, it seems like something that that could have just kind of gone away. Like, okay, they asked for stuff and clearly the Lakers and Raptors weren't going to acquiesce. And in 2021, supposedly the Clippers, they gave him this extra money. So, um,
Can I
yeah, I
point
mean,
something out very quickly, by the way?
yeah,
Seen a lot of people suggest that because the date on this deal was, I think the deal was 2022 to 2026. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I've seen a lot of people basically suggest because it came around Kawhi's extension and not his initial signing, that means that this didn't have anything to do with getting Kawhi to the Clippers. Now, again, we know so little at this point. I'm not saying anything definitively, but what I am saying is like I think it's all connected where if this is indeed what happened, if there was cap circumvention, I wouldn't look at this and say, oh, because it happened in 21 or 22, it had nothing to do with 2019. For all we know, and again, we're in speculation territory, there could have been promises made in 2019 that were realized in 21 or 22 after the investigations, basically when the heat was down. Now, again, we know so little that I can't sit here and say, oh, that's what happened. I mean, at this point, I'm not comfortable saying anything
yeah.
definitively, but I wouldn't point to the timing here and say, oh, because it happened several years later, that means the recruitment, it wasn't involved in that. If something untoward did happen, then I think it's fair game for us to speculate that just because it happened at one point doesn't mean it wasn't negotiated earlier.
What I'm interested in knowing is why this amount, because I think there's been some um, confusion about like how Kawhi's contracts have been. Because technically the maximum contract he could have signed with the Raptors, yeah, it's a little bit more than what he got with the Clippers or could have gotten with the
Max is a
Lakers.
max, right? Most of the time.
Yeah. Like the difference is really not it's not this amount. And either way, so he did his 2 year max with the Clippers with the intention of opting out. So he gets his 10th year, and then he signed a 4 year max with the Clippers. Like the amount of money he quote unquote left on the table, it's all within the raises. It's very small. So I don't see, I didn't do the math. I don't see how he could have lost $50 million by
No.
leaving the Raptors. The only thing I can see is like, okay, well, he's like, he never got the super max because he only could have gotten that with the Spurs.
He
That's
was
the
a
only
10-year
other
veteran
type,
by the extension. By
like
the
the early
2021
super
extension.
max.
Yeah.
I'm talking about
Oh.
like if he,
But
let's say,
that ship had sailed because he had left the Spurs. Yeah.
like that's the only kind of way I could see where, and again, I'm not going to retroactively do the math, but that might kind of make sense where maybe he wanted his, like what his supermax would have been earlier. I do hope there is some reporting in the future about like why this amount, like why they felt compelled to pay him this amount, which
I
is
think
like,
you're overthinking it, to be clear. I think it's this amount. If this is indeed what happened, I kind of think this is just the amount they could get, right? Like I kind of just think they weren't thinking about it symbolically. I don't think they were thinking like, oh, he needs to be made whole for X, Y, or Z reason. I kind of think once you're circumventing the cap, if that's what you're doing, you're kind of just doing it for as much as you think you can get away with.
I don't know. It's just it's so much more than probably like any other type of like
I have another
thing.
question though. Here's the thing that this what stood out to me from Bruce Arthur's reporting and then going back to Pablo was this notion that apparently Uncle Dennis said we want these $10 million in sponsorship per year, but we don't want to do anything for it. And then obviously what Pablo Torre reported was that Kawhi was paid, I want to say 21 out of the 28 million, but don't quote me on that. And he had done nothing for aspiration. I guess my big question here is why it was so important to him, apparently, reportedly, whatever, allegedly, to not do anything for this. Because sponsor, like, I'm not going to sit here and say all sponsorship is easy, but like throwing up a post for plausible deniability on social media or doing one, photo shoot or shooting one commercial or whatever it is, that's not especially difficult, right? Like some players do that a lot more. Like, ask LeBron about what his sponsor schedule is like and compare that to like not being willing to show up at all. It doesn't have to be especially hard. And the other part of this is when Kawhi was a free agent having these conversations with Toronto, I think Kawhi was so popular in Toronto coming off of the championship that like finding however many millions in sponsorship probably wouldn't have been that difficult, right? He was the most popular athlete in Toronto at the time. Maybe I'm not totally familiar with the Maple Leafs, but the Maple Leafs haven't won a Stanley Cup. So at the very least, he was the most popular Raptor they'd ever had, and maybe one of those popular athletes in all of Canada. I have to imagine any amount of sponsorship that he would have wanted within reason would have been available. The thing I just keep coming back to here is why would it have been so important to do nothing? And the question that I want answered from Kawhi in all of this is when you signed this agreement, what was your expectation of what was going to be expected of you? What did you think you were getting paid all of these $1 million to do? Was it a situation where there were promises about work you would render and ultimately didn't for one reason or another? Was there like, would he, basically plead the fifth and say, oh, I don't look over this stuff, my team does it? I want to know what he thinks he was getting paid here for, because when you put all of this together, there's just a lot of questions about like, why is he involved in so many things involving sponsors or making demands of sponsors or teams involving sponsors where he does not provide a service? That is a big question for me in all of this.
Yeah, the demand just seemed like excessively unreasonable, and eventually this all caught up. I'd also like to know about what is motivating some people to that are like close to the situation to come out now. You did mention how there was an employee who sued them. I think that lawsuit like was announced last year.
I don't think that was a
Uh,
Clippers employee, to be clear.
a former Clip, I think it was a former Clippers
You
employee, and he
might be
was
right. I'm going
saying,
to look this up. Are you
and he
talking about
was
the Jerry
saying,
West lawsuit?
no, no, no. I don't know if West is involved. Maybe he's implicated. He's saying that there was something about like there was an effort to bring in Kawhi, like which again kind of goes back to these tea leaves about like, yeah, this is what we know has to do with 2021, but how is it potentially involved in 2019? Because as we see now with this reporting today, these demands started back in 2019, which may have influenced the decision, Kawhi's decision ultimately about where to sign. I would like to know, if possible, like what is going on that like a lot of people now feel compelled to come out and say something. I'm sure I don't know. I doubt we'll ever find that out. Those are personal reasons, but um, I, I think we should just kind of move forward though, as far as like the impact, because yes, this I think is going to take some time. I would be surprised if enough stuff comes out that this gets resolved before the season starts. Um, so yeah, this will probably take into the season. So if you're a certain restricted free agent right now, hoping for the worst case scenario to happen to the Clippers, and that opens up max cap space for you, I'm sorry, I don't think that's coming in the short
Well, can
term.
I throw out the other two fan scenario? Well, the one fan scenario and the other, like, my insane scenario that are not going to happen, to be clear. I've seen some people say, oh, we don't want Kawhi's contract to get voided before the season because then he'll have nothing to do but sign for the minimum with the Lakers. That's not happening. And I think the NBA, if even if they found a smoking gun tomorrow, I imagine they would try to take steps to prevent that from happening. And then the other fun scenario that I kind of had in mind that's not going to play out would be if Kawhi's contract were voided before the season, could the Nets take their, you'd have the number, I don't have it, but something like $22 million in cap space, sign Kawhi for 1 year, sit him out until like January 15th, either through a suspension or through a quote unquote injury, have him play for like 2 weeks and then trade him at the deadline. That was the other fun
Yeah,
scenario of like if this were to happen before the season, but neither of us
yeah,
think there's any chance that anything could get settled before the season. I think Kawhi will be a member of the Clippers on opening night. I feel relatively comfortable saying that.
yeah,
So those were the
yeah,
scenarios that, like, either the Lakers one I'd seen people talk about the Nets one was just kind of in the back of my
Yeah.
mind. Don't
Yeah.
that stuff's out. Yeah.
And in case viewers couldn't catch, I was talking about Jonathan Kaminga. I would guess that if Kawhi got voided like within the next month, that Jonathan Kaminga would very likely get an offer sheet by the Clippers that the Warriors just straight up won't match. Because
Yeah.
there's like a number, like I want to say it's probably like starting at 25 and above, that with what the Warriors are trying to do to fill out their roster, they and standard the second apron, they wouldn't just not be able to match it. Like if you give Kaminga like something like 25 million plus, then all of a sudden the Warriors can't use their tax pyramid level on Horford, which might not be the worst. Like maybe the Warriors could probably live with that, but that's just something that like it would be impacted. So that's my fun scenario. I would imagine like the Clippers immediately pounce on Kaminga if they just
Well,
magically
see, I
got
have
this
the
cap
cap. I have
space.
your cap sheets in front of me. You have the Clippers right now at 194 million in salary. Kawhi makes 50 million. That so you wipe away that contract. That would get them to 144 million roughly. The cap is 154 with a little bit more on top of that. So that would only leave them like $10 million in space. Do you have
Oh,
another
you're
way
right.
to so do they just wouldn't have enough money.
Oh, then
They
you
would have to
dump
create
you
money some other
dump
way.
dump but no, they'd be at 15 and a half when you get rid of these cap holds. So then you could just
Oh, I
dump
didn't.
find the Bogdanovich trade Sam to the Nets, and then boom, you got your Kaminga offer sheet.
Okay, so it's doable, but it would take a little bit of
Yeah,
doing. But either way, we don't. Kawhi's not going to get voided before the season, so whatever.
right. So now I think it's worth discussing. Okay, so if the worst case scenario does happen, what can that be? So let's revisit Joe Smith, that situation. There was the biggest thing was the loss of draft picks. I think that's like the biggest death nail that can happen to the Clippers if it is proven that they did circumvent the cap. They get fines. The player can get fined. I know you looked into this more than me. What else is there? What else can happen?
So I mean,
Voiding of the contract.
voiding the contract is obviously the big one. There's a set amount that you can be fined based on the nature of the violation. I think the highest amount is 7.5 million for the team. You can have a situation where the owner is suspended up to a year. I would have to look into the legality of this, but I also do wonder if they were to find something, would the other owners maybe try to vote Ballmer out as they did with Donald Sterling? That is a whole other can of worms that I'm not prepared to speak on eloquently right now. But I mean, it is something where you do kind of wonder if somebody of these means is doing something like this. Ballmer, I don't think the casual fan understands just how much more money Steve Ballmer has than like the majority of NBA owners. And really, like, kind of almost if you put all of them together, I believe his net worth is like 150 billion, right? Like he could buy, if not the entire league, most of it. Most of the league is just not really close to that, right? Like I think the second richest NBA owner there would be the Adelsons, who are at around like 30 billion. And these are all, internet net worths, so take them for what it's worth. But I would imagine that the other owners, if they found out that Ballmer was doing something like this, might be a little bit uncomfortable having somebody this wealthy who was circumventing the rules. Again, I'm not prepared to go down that route. The biggest, obviously, would be the draft picks, the voiding of the contract, and of course, the suspension for the people involved. The draft picks, so to point out the Joe Smith situation, initially it was 5 first round picks that were taken away. 2 were then added back. So it ultimately ended up being 3 first round picks instead of 5, because I think the NBA ultimately even realized that when you take 5 first round picks away from a team, you're not utterly dooming them depending on circumstance, right? Like if the Thunder lost 5 first round picks today, I think they'd be fine. But for the majority of teams, that's such a significant penalty that the punishment goes beyond punishing conduct, right? At a certain point there, you're punishing the fans. So I do think that you have to take that into consideration. And we can probably say that 3 first round picks is probably the absolute limit. And 3 first round picks, to be clear, would be like they find a smoking gun. They have absolute evidence. There's no doubt. if it's circumstantial, there's just no way we're going to get 3 first round picks. The other thing that we should talk about, by the way, are what those 3 first round picks, or any first round picks for that matter, would be. Because the Clippers have a number of encumbered first round picks, right? They have picks that they owe out through swaps, where they're guaranteed to have a first round pick, but it's maybe not theirs and maybe not especially valuable. Something that you posed to me off of air, which I thought was really interesting. The Clippers right now have trade access to 3 future first round picks. It's 2030, 2031, and 2032. Hypothetically, it's not likely because we're not in the middle of a transaction.
I should just clarify, first round picks they could actually trade.
Yes,
because they also have, they also have picks in the odd numbered years, 29, 27, which they cannot
29,
trade.
they have swapped picks.
Yeah, they cannot trade
those
those
can't
at the
be
moment.
traded. But anyway, something that you posed to me was that the Clippers do have these tradable first round picks in 30, 31, and 32. It's not likely because we're not in the middle of a transaction cycle. But hypothetically, the Clippers could decide tomorrow, hey, we really want this player on this other team. We're going to trade our picks in 30, 31, and 32 to go get that guy. The fact that they're under investigation does not preclude them from making a trade like that. It's not like their draft picks are frozen because they might get taken. So you do kind of wonder, if the Clippers are feeling the heat, might they look at this and say, like, well, let's spend these picks now while we have the chance. But if they were to do that, the NBA does have a 7-year rule for first round picks in trade. So right now, NBA teams can't trade picks beyond 2032. That doesn't mean the NBA can't strip picks after 7 years. So maybe it would be a situation where if the Clippers were to trade their picks, the NBA would just shrug and say, like, cool, we're taking 33 and 34 or something like that.
Right.
So it's kind of up in the air, not only how many picks are at stake, but which picks are potentially at stake. And then the other question here is, what picks do you think the NBA would try to take if they were to, right? Like, would they be thinking we're taking your upcoming pick, which is not especially valuable, just because it's soon and we want you to feel it right away and we want to send a message? Or are they thinking your most valuable picks are very clearly those picks in 30, 31, and 32, so those are the ones that we're going to go after? I don't know. There's not really a precedent for a situation like that.
I think it's going to be pretty simple. If it ends up being 3, which I don't even expect it to be 3, but let's say hypothetically they strip
1, frankly.
Yeah. We'll get into what we could expect at the end. But I would guess, like, let's say it is 3, which, like you mentioned, the Wolves were docked 5, but in the end they only actually took away 3. Retroactively, they let them keep 2 of them. I would guess 3 is the max. And I would probably expect it to be less than that. But if it is 3, it's just going to be the most soonest ones, which would be 27, 29, 31, assuming they trade 2030 by then. But let me ask you this, because, again, this discussion is more so about, like, try to get into the actual on-court impact. You are an expert, Sam, in my opinion, on the value of outgoing draft picks. Where do you rank now? Just without any penalties being doled out, just knowing that this is hovering over the league's head. The Sixers right now, they've got 2 or 1 Clippers pick right now. I think the Thunder have also a swap. How valuable are these outgoing Clippers picks right now? The 2028 potentially in the swaps.
Already owed, to be clear.
Yeah.
I still have that 2028 Clippers pick. I'd have to pull up my rankings to see. I published that maybe a month or so ago. I want to say I had 2028 Clippers in or around the top 10. It's a very valuable pick because it hits that sweet spot where it's not immediate, right? Because the Clippers, as constructed right now, the 2025-26 Clippers, are a very good team, a team that we expect to be like a 4 or 5 seed in the West. Their 26 pick, sure, there's downside risk because of Kawhi's injury history, because of Harden's age, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the 26th pick is all that valuable, but 2028 hits that sweet spot where you think Kawhi and Harden and the other old guys on the team, it's the oldest roster in the NBA. And I believe, is it the oldest roster in NBA history or one of them?
So it depends how you're looking at it. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. And I tweeted about it. You can look at what the rotation is expected to be, in which case, yes, it is going to be the oldest team. If you're looking at who's going to be playing, then they're going to be older than the 2001 Utah Jazz, whose main rotation was super old. But if you're just looking at like the total, like the aggregate of all their players under standard contracts, I'm not going to count two ways because then you can't really compare teams from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Then it's not the youngest team. I think the Knicks in 2013, I mean, the oldest team. I think the Knicks in 2013 and the Lakers in 2022 are actually older when you take the whole entire group. But I would say, looking at the rotations, it's probably more valuable because you want to see who actually played. And in which case, this Clippers team's expected rotations will be the oldest in history. But go on.
That 2028 pick that Philly has is immensely valuable because even if you trust Kawhi and Harden to be what they were last year, this year, it's very unlikely given their ages that they're going to be that good in 2 years in 2028. The Clippers having such a limited stock of future picks makes it harder for them to rebuild the roster on the fly and get good by 2028 unless they were to do it through free agency, as has been the widespread rumor, which is, oh, they're saving cap space, whether it's for 2026 or 2027. I think Bill Simmons had said Giannis was like the guy they're waiting for. This is my personal opinion. And I mean, look, we were wrong on this in 2019, right? When we all thought Kawhi's going to go to the Lakers and he went to the Clippers. My opinion is that the next star that goes to Los Angeles with a bullet, I'm going to say, is going to go to the Lakers because that's kind of how it works. The Lakers have the young star to recruit with. If Giannis says, I want to go to LA, I see no reason why he would choose the Clippers over the Lakers when the Lakers are also planning for that cap space and when the Lakers don't have this investigation hanging over their heads. So I think the notion that the Clippers are going to rebuild their team through free agency or like a big trade in the next year or two, I don't think it would happen through the addition of like another cornerstone star. But we saw this team in 2018-19 after they had traded Blake Griffin, when they were in that period where they were kind of just waiting for Kawhi. That team still won 48 games, right? Where it was like the Patrick Beverley team with Doc as the coach. I think there's a world where the Clippers in 28 are past Kawhi, past Harden, but kind of just put together a team that's like somewhat competitive and wins 45 games because they're good at that and they're smart people in that front office and Ty Lue's a great coach. But I think the ceiling is very, very low in 27, 28. And obviously the floor is all the way at the bottom. And then there's the other reality to this which kind of throws it off. The value of each pick is impacted by the value of every other pick that a team owns. So what do I mean by that? In 2027, the Clippers currently have swap rights with the Thunder. Or I should say, the Thunder have the right to swap with the Clippers. But those swap rights are top 5 protected. And the Clippers might look at this, especially if, whether it's Giannis or Jokic or whoever, like whoever they're targeting, if that guy is off the table by then, the Clippers might be justified in saying, we want to tank and try to keep our top 5 protected pick, especially because 5 is a very very important slot from a protection standpoint, because top 5 is like, that's the lowest protection that you can have, where in theory the team can guarantee that it keeps the pick, right? If you have the worst record in the NBA, you cannot pick lower than number 5. Therefore, if the Clippers see a totally bleak outlook and they have that top 5 protected pick in 27, they can just say, we are intentionally going to be the worst team in the NBA because we know that guarantees that we keep our pick. If the pick is top 4 protected, this is how significant a difference it is. Your odds of keeping the pick are less than 50%, right? It's 48% 1 to 4 and then 52% for number 5 overall. I believe that's the math. We can double check that later. But the fact that it's top 5 protected means that they could decide in 2027, we're going to tank and we're going to try to keep that pick. But if you do that, then your team is still really bad a year later in 28 when the Sixers get those picks. So and what you do in any given year affects what you're going to do in other years, and teams are therefore watching it. All in all, though, I would say that 28 pick that the Clippers owe the Sixers is very valuable. Those swaps that the Thunder have in 27, and I believe they also have it in 29, but don't quote me on that, are also like pretty valuable. And then the last thing I want to bring up on this front, if the Clippers are really devious and if they also really think that they're innocent, what if you played up the possibility that you were guilty in trade negotiations and you go to another team and you say, hey, you might really want to trade for our pick in 2030 or 2032 or whatever because the NBA is about to hammer us, right? You
Okay.
really want to control our picks. So it's therefore more valuable in a trade. And then you go through it. But if you're really confident that the NBA is not going to hammer you, then suddenly that pick is less valuable. So you've taken advantage of the perception that this investigation is putting on you in the league and traded your picks for more value than they're actually worth. So
Yes.
it's a fascinating situation all around.
So that's what I wanted to get to. Well, first of all, like very long way of saying yes. All their outgoing current picks are much more valuable. And I think that whatever picks they can trade right now, the 2030 to 2032, it did get more valuable right now. Even if nothing happens, yeah, you can use the perception, I suppose, of, hey, like, this pick that's super far out, we're an old team, we might get in trouble. I suppose you can sort of, because if let's say they lose their 27 and 29, even though they're probably going to be low picks, that's not great for a Clippers team that's already very old, doesn't really have any flexibility, which is why, I mean, they do have flexibility. This is probably, their lack of high picks coming in, lack of upside is probably why they're hoping that they can get someone in free agency. Granted, yeah, they're in LA. And I do want to touch on what you were discussing is, whether they lost their free agency advantage. But I do feel like, yeah, the value of their picks has potentially gone up if they have. So the question is there something out there that the Clippers find appetizing enough to maybe trade them now? Because it might be the type of thing where maybe the Clippers do expect a punishment and they decide, okay, well, we're gonna get screwed in a couple of years anyways. Let's absolutely go for it right now. Try to win it all right now in these next 2 years, because we might not have another chance. Maybe after, this year, they might not have a chance if like Kawhi got voided or something like that, suspended. So yeah, I still find it unlikely. I would guess the league's not going to tell the Clippers, no, you can't trade your picks right now because you are under investigation and we might have to penalize you these picks. I think they'll just, if whatever they decide there's ways around. They could dock other picks. Now, you were talking about the while describing all this about their free agency advantage, where the thing is, the Clippers always made sense to me.
Can I ask one question very quickly?
What?
You've talked about potentially docking the Clippers the 27 and the 29 picks. Those are both owed out through swap rights, right? I think it's the Thunder, both years, don't quote me.
For 27, I believe. Oh, no, Sixers. No, I think it's Sixers now, don't they?
No, I think what the Sixers did in the Harden trade was they used a Clippers swap to get a firm first-round pick from the Thunder, who then got the second swap on top of that. But whatever it is, whatever, we can check later. Those
27 swap to OKC, 29 swap to Philly.
Right. So those picks are owed out through swaps. Let's say the Clippers are docked their pick. What happens to the protections, right? Because hypothetically, 2027, the Clippers get the number 3 overall pick naturally, but it was protected. Do they just lose that and the Thunder have control of their original pick? Or do the Thunder just automatically get control of wherever the pick would have been? How do you manage that with a swap? And that gets very complicated. So my thought is, you might have to just take whatever the soonest unencumbered pick is, because you don't want to mess with the swap. And I'm not even talking about in the tangible ways. The Thunder might argue that by virtue of that pick being protected top 5, the Clippers have some incentive to be bad to try to keep that pick, which therefore gives them more upside of potentially being able to swap into the number 6 overall pick or the number 7 overall pick. But if you remove their pick incentive entirely, then the Clippers lose that incentive, and therefore the Thunder lose upside on their swap. So the Thunder and the Sixers might go to the NBA and say, hey, you can't take away picks that are encumbered through swap rights because that affects the value of picks that we've negotiated for in good faith.
I I phew,
It's
I don't know.
complicated, yeah.
That's complicated. Yeah,
So
I would
it might
guess
just
most
have
like
to be unencumbered picks.
I would guess it doesn't really ever get to that because I think the Clippers are going to just try to stay as relevant as possible. If they're going to be docked a 27 and for pick, for example, let's say they got docked or 27 first. Yeah, it's top 5 protected to OKC. So if it falls within the protection, then probably what happens is, okay, OKC doesn't get to swap it. They just get whatever. They're going to have the 30th overall pick. But the Clippers, they're supposed to have like a top 5 pick. They just wouldn't get any pick. So the Clippers just get that just like doubles down on the punishment. Like they were really bad and they don't get any pick. So I don't get why that would like impact OKC so much if the Clippers.
You can't do a punishment that also punishes the Thunder or the 76ers in any way because they do have some draft control from the Clippers. I think if you're going to take picks that are involved in swaps, the teams involved in those swaps have to approve it, essentially.
So no, but you're talking.
I think that's just, you can't punish the Thunder and the 76ers.
You're saying what if the Clippers, like, in a way to like spite everything, maybe they just they tank, they fall within the top 5, and that screws over OKC. I mean, that's just that would be something I think people would kind of like notice that they're like tanking. Like tanking alone is its own separate issue. That I don't know, that we'll see when we get. This is really good stuff that you brought up. I don't know. I got to think about this.
I think the NBA would not take away an encumbered pick is my thought.
Yeah.
Because you then have to involve the teams and you're basically retroactively changing old trades. I think they would take like whatever amount of picks they decide to take, if they take any, it would be unencumbered picks in the future. And if the Clippers hypothetically were to encumber their picks in 30, 31, and 32, then if the NBA wanted to take picks, they would take picks in 33, 34, whatever.
Yeah, you make a good point. That I think that's just something like once they cross that bridge, like if the docking of picks is on the table, I'm sure OKC and Philly will probably have like a say in this. So they'll try to like, hey, like please don't impact these picks. We want to potentially get a swap on them. We'll see. I mean, especially OKC's. I think the 29 is unprotected. Oh no, that's top 3 protected. Yeah, it is a little tricky in that sense. Even though they're unlikely to even fall within that range, I would guess most likely they just there is no the picks don't fall in the protected range. But we'll see. But anyway, I just want to move on to what you were talking about because the Clippers are gonna have they're planning to have cap space. They want to have flexibility over the next few seasons. And given everything going on, that makes sense now. That might be even without this is like kind of their only way for them to significantly improve the roster without trading any of their future picks. The thing is, even though there is a lot of there has been a lot of reporting about what Kawhi and his uncle were demanding back in 2019 from all the teams. It doesn't look good in retrospect, knowing that now this is out in the air. I still feel like the Clippers made sense for basketball reasons. Like just as much as the Lakers and Raptors. Like the Raptors really like him, a Finals MVP leaving his team after winning a championship. That's unheard of. That's never happened. But I'm pretty sure up until that point. So like, I would say basketball wise, it probably made sense for him to at least it made a little more sense to at least run it back for a year, see if you can repeat. I think that's what most players in his position would have done. But when the Clippers also had a ready-made team, like they not only did they plan to have cap space, but they had a lot of players on cheap contracts, rookie scale contracts. They already had the depth in place. The Nets did a similar thing when they brought in Kawhi and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They already had the depth. They had all the cap space while already having a set team. It wasn't really like that with when the Lakers were setting cap space. It was mostly like just they're trying to have the team like Kawhi, LeBron, and AD.
They were the
Eh,
reverse, right? The Lakers
yeah,
had 2 stars and no depth, whereas the Clippers had no stars and the depth. And the Clippers pushed themselves over the top by making the Paul George trade, which basically was the compromise where you'll have depth and you'll have the co-star of your choosing.
yes. So I just think it still made sense basketball wise, especially considering that the Clippers paid a huge price to bring in like Paul George fresh off a borderline MVP season. Like talk about selling at the absolute peak of a player's value. The Thunder, they benefited from this. They got all the value. SGA eventually led to the championship, potential dynasty coming up. And then the other thing people are looking at that they're kind of poking at as well. Now he extended with the Clippers on this slightly below max contract. He's making maybe like he's going to be making 50 million flat. He's making 50 million flat this year and next year. And then he did it last year. I don't really think I don't have a problem with that. I think where he is at this stage in his career, he's a 14-year vet. I think more players should probably be doing it, doing this to help their teams. Obviously, now it might bring some unwanted attention when a player does that because of this investigation going on. Is he getting compensated elsewhere? But in like from a cap sense, from a basketball sense, I don't see anything wrong with this contract, and I can't really tie what is being alleged to have happened in 2021 as a way to like maybe preemptively pay him in advance for taking less than the max. That's kind of like real 4D 5D chess that you can never that's going to be very hard to prove. Like I'd be shocked if they could somehow connect those things.
Yeah, the
So
last extension, to be clear, was definitely fair market value. If
yeah.
Kawhi had been a free agent in 2024, I don't think he does better than he did in reality. The only team with the money would have been the Sixers. And I think for a variety of reasons, the Sixers would have rather given Paul George the 4-year max than given it to Kawhi. Plus, Kawhi got the benefit of getting the security early. So that contract, even though it was below max, I think was reasonable fair market value.
And I bring this up because another discussion we had off air is, well, which situation is worse, this one or Joe Smith? And I think there's two ways to look at it. The way what you touched on, I'll give you the floor to discuss this, make your case, is that you feel that the Joe Smith situation is worse in the sense that he wouldn't have joined the Wolves otherwise, probably, had they not done what they did, promising contracts in the future by building up bird rights. Whereas Kawhi, I just kind of made the case that I kind of think he would have gone to the Clippers anyways. I like it just made sense to me. So elaborate on the Joe Smith part.
First of all, about Kawhi going to the Clippers, I think you're right. I think, remember, like there was a brief period of 4 or 5 days where the Lakers looked like the favorite, but that entire year we thought it was the Clippers. I was not surprised when he ended up with the Clippers. I'll put it that way. Like, I don't think many people were. Maybe they were surprised by some of the circumstances, but he ultimately.
I'll just pause for a second because I will say I remember Woj tweeting when Kawhi was asking out from the Spurs. Woj then specifically said that the Lakers are his preferred destination. That was a year before he hit free agency and right before he got traded to the Raptors. But then throughout the season, we started getting like some report. The Clippers, Lawrence Frank is going to the games. We're checking out Kawhi. They're going to make a push. Like we started getting all these inklings that the Clippers are like a dark horse. Yeah, but go on.
So anyway, but what the difference is between the Kawhi situation, if it's true, and the Joe Smith situation is that the Clippers did not circumvent the cap in a way that allowed them access to a player that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get, right? Kawhi, when he first signed with the Clippers, signed for the max. Kawhi's second extension with the Clippers was also for the max. Paying him more than the max is cap circumvention, but it's not cap circumvention that gives you a competitive advantage unless you believe Kawhi wouldn't have gone to the Clippers unless they circumvented the cap to give him more, which I don't think anyone really believes, or certainly it's not something that you can prove. The Joe Smith situation gave the Timberwolves access to a player in Joe Smith that they did not have the financial means to sign. I'd have to go back and check how much cap space they had in the offseason of, I think it was 1998. But I believe you sign a player to a 1-year, $2 million contract, or whatever it is, because you don't have the means to sign them to the 7-year, $86 million deal that was coming at the end of the rainbow. That gives you access to a player in Joe Smith that you otherwise likely or may not have been able to actually sign. But then also on top of that, because that player is on your books making so much less than his fair market value, that also gives you financial freedom to pursue other players on top of that. So essentially what the Timberwolves did in their cap circumvention was give themselves a competitive on-court basketball advantage, which the Clippers didn't have. So to me, personally, I view the Joe Smith situation as worse, like something that should be punishable more, even though the money involved, I don't want to say the money involves less because it's complicated because his contract was more than what Kawhi got, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, what the Timberwolves did, I view as cheating in a more literal sense than what the Clippers are being accused of. What the Clippers are being accused of is certainly A, breaking a rule, and B, if they ultimately did it, worthy of a significant penalty. But it's not like, hypothetically, like Kawhi signed for 30 million instead of 50 million, and then the Clippers got to use that spare 20 million to go sign another key player, and then Kawhi just got the rest of that money off the books to make up for it. I view the Clippers, what they did, less as cheating, or what they are alleged of doing. I view that less as cheating and more as like a violation in, I guess, not just the spirit of the rules, but the letter of the rules. But it's not one that actually gave them a competitive advantage. So to me, even if the Clippers did this, I view Joe Smith as worse. That being said, Joe Smith's contract was voided. He was not suspended, to be clear. Joe Smith's contract was voided. He became a free agent. He signed a new contract with another team. I believe it was the Wizards, but I'd have to go back and check. If Kawhi and if the Clippers did this, I kind of don't see a way around voiding the contract. If you find that smoking gun that says that they illegally circumvented the cap, you probably have to void the rest of his contract and say that he can't re-sign with the Clippers, which the NBA did with Joe Smith. They said he could not re-sign with the Timberwolves. And I think the big thing, we maybe haven't danced around it, but something we haven't addressed. If you're the Clippers, is voiding Kawhi's contract a good thing or a bad thing? You could argue both sides, and I think where the Clippers are, they'd just rather have Kawhi. But there certainly are basketball benefits to saving this money if that is ultimately what happens. It does give you a clearer path to even more cap space in 2026 to totally remake your team. And B, if you wanted to tank for that top 5 protected pick, if you still have it, which obviously, if we get to the point where Kawhi's contract is getting voided, you might not have it. I don't know. That's a whole complicated scenario, but that might give them a pretty clean way to tank if that's something that they wanted to do. So I'll just pose the question to you now. If you were the Clippers, would you want Kawhi's contract voided or not?
No. One, they already have a lot of flexibility. So they don't need more flexibility. Like, they're going to have a lot of future flexibility. And two, they can't really tank. They can't because
the Pistons, not the Wizards, to be clear, by the way. Joe Smith signed with the Pistons. That was just going to drive me crazy.
The Clippers cannot tank because they owe swaps and they owe 2 picks. They cannot bottom out through until at least 2031, in which case Kawhi might not even, he might be out of his, he might not be Kawhi right now. As far as what's worse, I both agree and disagree with what you put out. I'll start with what I agree with. I think what you're making the case for is like its impact on the league. Where yes, Joe Smith wouldn't have signed with the Wolves otherwise had this not happened. another more deserving team probably lost out on him. Whereas with the Clippers, they had the means to pay him no matter what. So in that sense, yes, I agree that the Joe Smith situation is worse. When you're looking at the type of circumvention that happened, the Wolves promised Joe Smith extra money. I think there was going to be like an 80 something million dollar deal over 6 years. I read
7 years, 86 million was the
yeah. They promised him that in writing once he accrued his bird rights after 3 minimum deals, or maybe they could have done some non-bird deals, to give him a little extra money in the meantime. Something could have gone wrong, and obviously something did go wrong, and he didn't get all that money. Eventually, he returned to the Wolves. But either way, this is more of a promise. Like, the Wolves could have not done it. That would have ended up ugly for everybody involved. But that... when you're looking at the type of circumvention that happened, I don't think that's as bad as the Clippers already like paying Kawhi all this, allegedly, laundering a bunch of extra money to Kawhi. So I think that's like the best way. It's like, it's both worse, but also not as bad. Like the impact is not for the Clippers, the impact on the league is not as bad. Them getting Kawhi, how they may have whatever means they did, but like the way they did it, I would say is probably arguably worse than what the Wolves did. I would probably though think that what's more important is probably the former. Like, what did it really drastically hurt, like change how things could have gone in the league? Not as much as the Joe Smith situation. I just kind of fall in the realm that I just think Clippers were just a reasonable option. I don't think, I think the way it went down, it just made sense, even without this stuff, this extra financial potential benefits. Like, I just think it made sense to me. It still makes sense to me that he joined the Clippers. So in that sense, yeah, it's probably not as bad as the Joe Smith situation.
Yeah, I think the way I look at 2019 free agency, I think everything Kawhi did was based on wanting to be a Clipper, but wanting to get as much out of being a Clipper as possible. When I say that, I'm not necessarily talking about extra money as far as cap circumvention. I'm talking about him not only wanting to be a Clipper, but wanting to have the right team around him, or the team that he believes was right. I think he used the Lakers primarily to convince the Clippers to make the Paul George trade. Now, if you're telling me that, like, as part of this cap circumvention scheme, this was something that was agreed to in 2019, we'll see if that's something they dig up or something the NBA alleges. But like, I could see that on top of it. But ultimately, I think he wanted to be a Clipper in 2019, but I think he mainly, like, he used 2019 free agency as a way to not only get to his preferred team, but to get to his preferred team under the ideal circumstances for him. It just might turn out that one of those circumstances was something that we didn't know about and are now learning about. So then my next question becomes, hypothetically, if Kawhi Leonard's contract were to be voided at some point in the next 8 to 12 months, let's say hypothetically, what do we expect his market would be like as a 2026 free agent? Because interestingly, one team that we expect to have cap space in 2026 are the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, that depends on a variety of factors, right? If they want to make their big trade, they might need their cap space to do that. If they want to re-sign LeBron James, they would therefore probably lose their cap space because he would take up most of it, right? The immediate thought would be, okay, Kawhi's contract with the Clippers gets voided. The Lakers make the most sense. But like, what would you say hypothetically if his contract was voided? What would you think of him for 2026 as a free agent? Are you just thinking Lakers,
Yeah.
Lakers? Are there other teams? And what's the amount?
So obviously the other thing is, will the league add a punishment that Kawhi can't re-sign with the Clippers? Like, they could reasonably do that, in which case if he can't return, if that happens, then I would guess, like, if you look at the teams that are set to be have cap space next summer, there's the Lakers and the Heat. Those are the two that jump to mind.
Heat are interesting.
I'd imagine both those teams would be very interested in bringing in Kawhi and they'll have the. I don't know if the Heat actually have enough. Let me just make sure, double
Well, I
check.
don't, well,
No, they got to get
then
rid
how
of
much
Wiggins
are we
first.
talking? Like how
They
much
got to get
money?
rid of Wiggins first.
But how much money would they need to have? Because I don't think if Kawhi Leonard is a free agent in 2026, based on his age, injury history, and the shadow of these allegations, I don't think it's likely that he would get a max. I think you could maybe get Kawhi, depending on how this season goes, of course, because like there's a world where he's just really, really good this year, and oh, somebody's super excited to sign him, or there's a scenario where he's really injured this year and his value goes down. But like, if you told me the Clipper or the Heat signed Kawhi for like 3 years, 90 million, like I could kind of see that for both sides. I actually don't think the Lakers would be that interested for a lot of the same reasons that they're not super interested in making a long-term commitment to LeBron. I think the Lakers are hyper fixated on this idea that whether it's in 2026 or in 2027, they're going to add a star on Luka's timeline. And I think the guys they have in mind are Giannis or Jokic. I think other players might pop into that conversation depending on a variety of factors. The Lakers will have 3 first-round picks to trade next offseason. I don't think they're thinking, even if it's a free, like you're getting him in free agency, if you're not giving anything up, I don't think they're thinking we want a guy in his 30s with injury issues. I think they're thinking we either want a top 5 player in the league or we want somebody who's 25 or 26 and changing teams for the first time so he can age with Luka. So I actually don't think the Lakers would be that interested. If the Lakers were going to go down the route of an older player, I think they'd just keep LeBron. The Heat actually make a lot of sense to me because the Heat just don't have access to that kind of talent otherwise, right? Like the Heat are sort of in this weird no man's land where they don't have the assets to trade for an A-list star. There aren't going to be those guys becoming available in free agency. And even if they do, like I don't think Giannis or Jokic would go to the Heat. I think there would be other teams higher up on their priority list. So it's the sort of risk I could see the Heat taking. I don't think the Lakers would probably do it.
Yeah, it's just one of those two, I suppose.
Or somebody could create the cap space, right?
Yeah, someone could get in there. Lakers can get to like 50 million. Heat could get to a little below. So maybe it's something below the max. Now, last thing I want to discuss, and yeah, this is more Kawhi centric. We're done with the Clippers aspect. Is so like what a potential punishment could be for him if this is all proven true. Because when the Joe Smith scandal happened, he didn't, as you just mentioned a couple minutes ago, he didn't get suspended, but he got his contract voided. He was free to sign wherever he went to, wherever he wanted to go, wherever he could. I'm wondering, if maybe part of the reason he didn't get suspended is because so he would have lost more money through a suspension. Maybe they feel like financially he had already, in a way, like been punished, by not signing market value when he could have. I kind of wonder if that's kind of what goes into the league's thinking when they discipline players. Like when I think about Miles Bridges, for example, when he got his suspension, I think they already kind of considered the idea that, hey, he just missed the whole year not getting any money when he probably would have made like 25 to $30 million that year. So now to add a suspension on top of that, they were saying it was like a retroactive suspension. Like he had already they already counted some of it when they announced the suspension. I'm just speculating maybe that's what happened with Joe Smith. And I bring this up because if Kawhi were to get his contract voided, now we're having a potential long timeline for teams like the Lakers, like the Heat, or whoever to position themselves to pay him. But if the NBA felt like an appropriate suspension is a financial one that kind of offsets the extra free money he got illegally, then you would want to suspend him as well, because then he's not getting paid for a certain amount of games. Like hypothetically, if he got suspended for this entire, let's say they find out right away that like within the next month that, yeah, this is all true, they want to void and suspend him. Like voiding him right now would cost him the rest of the money. But like, let's say happen next year, like, we're thinking there's going to be a resolution in like a while from now, so it could impact next year. Let's say he gets like a 1 year suspension off that 50 million. That's like $37 million, I believe. I did the calculation that he loses, which is would be probably more than whatever it was. So I just bring that up where that's just one way the league might consider it, how to appropriately punish him if that's how they wanted to do it. Where they, in the way, just try to figure out a way to offset whatever he got, in which case a suspension might have to be involved, because voiding him, teams can position themselves right now for him to recoup that money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about this, right? Like, number one, you could argue theoretically that it would be financially advantageous for Kawhi Leonard to have his contract voided, as amazing as that sounds, because it's, as I understand it, it's not, it's a straight, there's no option for 26, 27, right? So, like, say he were to
Yes.
just, if he goes into the 2026-27 season under contract, that's a 1 year, $50 million deal where hypothetically his value could go down during that season based on injury or wherever. Whereas if he became a free agent in 2026, like he could hypothetically sign like a 3 year, $100 million deal. And if he has a bad year in the first year, well, who cares? He has the next 2 years locked in already. So, like, that is a dangerous situation that you bring up where, like, you don't want to void the contract only for him to benefit from that happening. The other thing you have to consider is the timing of when you void the contract, if you're going to do that, right? Say hypothetically the investigation concludes on January 18th for whatever reason. If you void the contract on January 18th, you're setting up the most aggressive buyout bidding war in NBA history, because suddenly Kawhi Leonard is just sitting on the free agent market with, a month and a half before the buyout deadline. You don't want him signing for the minimum with some contender. Like, that throws off the competitive balance of the sport. So maybe if you were going to do something like that, a suspension makes more sense because it punishes him without altering the competitive landscape of the league. And then on top of that, if you void him, the Clippers get that money off of their books. Whereas if you suspend him, you still have the money on the books, right? Like, you're like essentially voiding him in some ways does benefit the Clippers, whereas a suspension wouldn't do that. They'd still have this $50 million contract on their books. So hypothetically, I do think a suspension might make some more sense. But I mean, I think the reality with any suspension is that there are hard and fast rules within the CBA and the Constitution about what the NBA can and can't suspend for, and whether an offense is worthy of a suspension or a voided contract or neither. I think you have to go by the guidelines laid out in those documents. If the rules say we're supposed to void the contract and not suspend him, then you kind of have to do it. And the last thing you want is to suspend him and then have the NBPA appeal the suspension and have that drag on for a long time. And
Yeah.
God only knows what happens there. So it's complicated. And, like, frankly, from a rules standpoint, I don't know whether the NBA would have the freedom to say, and we think a suspension is more appropriate than a void, so we're going to do that. Or
Yeah.
we think voiding is more, like, I think they're going to have to stick to the letter of the law, whatever it turns out to be, depending on what the investigation turns up.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, what I propose, like the void plus suspension, that probably the word. Like, he's not going to get banned for this. I don't think that's an appropriate
No.
punishment. As far as like worst case scenario stuff that's on the table, I think what I laid out is probably up there. It's probably somewhere in between, where maybe he gets like a little suspension. I kind of feel like he's not going to get voided. I don't know. Where do you? My feeling is probably Clippers get docked like one first round pick. Kawhi gets some fine or suspension, and I feel like that's kind of where it lands. And I don't know how happy the league will be about that, how satisfied they'll be.
We started at the beginning talking about the gap between what we believe and the threshold for proving something. And I think ultimately that's where we're going to end up, where I think Pablo Torre's reporting to this point alone, in conjunction with everything else, is pretty compelling. And I don't think, regardless of what the investigation turns up, I think a lot of fans, I think a lot of people in and around the league are going to believe that this happened. Whether or not it did, I can't tell you. But I think a lot of people around the league are ultimately going to believe that this happened. But I just have a very hard time believing that this investigation is going to be able to prove it. Because frankly, I think anybody who's engaging in cap circumvention in 2025 is probably smart enough not to leave a paper trail in doing so. And I wonder about the after effects of that, where hypothetically, if this what I believe is going to happen is there will be like a in the NCAA they used to have the lack of institutional control penalties, where you're supposed to know something is going on and you can't just say, "Oh, like this was a rogue agent, we didn't know, blah blah blah." No, you're supposed to know. And I think the Clippers will get docked something for that. They'll claim we didn't know, and the NBA will say, well, you should have known, so we're going to penalize you in some way. I just think that penalty is going to be minimal. I think it's going to be like tampering, where it's a second round pick and a, pocket change fine for Steve Ballmer. And after that, if that is what indeed happens, you're kind of sending a message to the rest of the sport that proving cap circumvention is basically impossible. And I do wonder, in a world where we know that proving cap circumvention is basically impossible, does that erode trust that fans have in the league, that the owners have in each other? Is that a message that essentially says it's open season on cap circumvention because we can't enforce these rules without a smoking gun? I don't know, but I'm wondering about that, right? Because I think most of us don't believe there's going to be like an email in which Steve Ballmer says, like, subject line cap circumvention. Hey, Aspire, I'd like you to help me cheat. That's not going to come up. We don't think it's going to come up. But if it doesn't, I don't know what the NBA can really do. So this puts the league in a really difficult position where they either have to come down really hard based on circumstantial evidence that frankly might not be fair to the Clippers, or they have to give the Clippers a slap on the wrist for something that even they might believe the Clippers actually did. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what the investigation is going to turn up. But I think no matter where we land, unless we do get that smoking gun text or email or whatever, is going to be unsatisfying to somebody here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it just such, I think, and this is my opinion, I think most people paying attention probably, they can interpret this is just such a bad look. This, like, the damage has already been done. I think for a lot of people, they now are looking at this and think, well, yeah, this happened. The Clippers probably did this. And where else is this happening? There's already some other speculation going on about certain contracts elsewhere that something might be fishy. I'm so rusty that I forgot to update the overlay at the top. It said Thunder reviewed the entire time. This is Clippers circumvention discussion. Sam, I want to leave this. I'm going to throw you this last question and then we'll be done. Kawhi is known as a mercenary, specifically for going to Toronto, winning a championship, and then leaving. He brought a championship to the Spurs. Hopefully he was going to do that for the Clippers. Hasn't happened yet. What would be a greater mercenary story? Kawhi Leonard getting traded to the Toronto Raptors, never wanted to be there, but he played out of his mind, won them a championship in his first try, beat the Warriors. Yes, Kevin Durant was injured, but they still beat them. And then he just left, but left them with that one championship. Or the Clippers facing this quote unquote adversity about the scandal over their heads. They adamantly believe, they're adamantly saying that they didn't do this, and they're facing some kind of like punishment, loss of draft pick, potential voiding of the contract. But through this, Kawhi pushes the Clippers over the Nuggets, over the Thunder, into the finals, wins the championship, and then he gets voided and now he can't return to the Clippers. What would be a greater mercenary story, that or what he did for the Raptors?
I'm kind of speechless. I think, honestly, if the Clippers win a championship, that would probably go down in the minds of fans. And I want to be clear, I'm saying in the minds of fans, and this is not for me, that would be the most tainted championship ever to fans. That would be so much worse than the bubble. The amount like that would, I think, almost get treated like the Astros winning the World Series in 2017. I think there would be just a collection of fans that would just say, like, we were never accepting this. The Clippers cheated. I don't know what the investigation is going to turn up, but like, I think the Clippers winning the championship this year and then the investigation showing that they have to void Kawhi's contract would be kind of. I just that's a horrible look for the league. You know what I wonder? Uh, if this turns out that the Clippers do have to void his contract, they can't retire his number, right? Like, there's no way the Clippers could if they do end up having to void his contract. That would just be the
I
end. It would kind of just say you have to distance yourself.
I would well I would guess that eventually Kawhi could return to the Clippers. That's the thing. Like Joe Smith was able to return to the Wolves. I just probably just for like a certain amount of time he wouldn't be allowed
I
to
don't.
return to the
That's not the
Clippers.
point, though. I think the NBA would kind of optically say you're inviting a lot of league scrutiny if he ever does come back. And I think Ballmer would just kind of understand we have to distance ourselves from him from an optics perspective. But it's weird that like Kawhi is kind of this man without a country, right? Where he's drafted by the Spurs and he grows into the star with the Spurs and he leaves under really acrimonious terms. 1 year with the Raptors, utterly beloved. If I had been Kawhi Leonard personally, I would have stayed with the Raptors because like being the guy who leads a team to their first championship, like you are a god in that city. And to go from that to going to the Clippers, where the Clippers and the Nets are in this kind of unique position, I think in all of sports, where the better you do for your team, the more your city is going to dislike you because Laker fans actively root for the Clippers to fail. And it's the same with the Knicks and the Nets because the Clippers succeeding makes life harder for the Lakers, and same with the Knicks and the Nets. So it's just this weird situation where Kawhi had this chance to be not only an icon in the city of Toronto, but to become like a Mount Rushmore Canadian athlete. And instead, he goes to be the villain in his own hometown. It's just a really fascinating situation where if we end up with cap circumvention, and by the way, the other part of this is the Clippers effectively traded Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and 5 first-round picks to get Kawhi. Imagine they lose 3 first-round picks for circumvention on top of that, and you have to look at the Kawhi era and say, like, getting Kawhi Leonard cost the Clippers Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and 8 first-round picks. That would just be utterly insane. And like you could say, no team has ever invested more to get less out of a single player if that's how it ultimately played out. It's a fascinating situation. I obviously don't believe the Clippers are going to lose 3 first-round picks, but there are just all of these tentacles. And from a narrative standpoint, it's kind of mind blowing.
In the highly, highly unlikely scenario that the Clippers this season win the championship, like they could have a deep run. When you take away this scandal going on, I think people would be extremely impressed and odd if Kawhi's able to lead this Clippers team over the Nuggets. I mean, they're probably, you can make the case that they're probably more even based on how the playoffs went, but over the Thunder to win a championship, like that's like that'd be some Jimmy Butler 2023 type stuff.
You're
Like
making
for him,
you're making LeBron's the bubble was actually the hardest championship argument right now.
no, I'm not saying it's going to be the hardest. I just think people would come out pretty impressed. Like I understand, I can't
right.
go as far and say that if people would view it as tainted. It's like
Right.
when you take that stuff away, like for Kawhi to be able to pull that off in year 7 with the Clippers after like 3 or 4 really serious knee injuries, surgeries, all that stuff. I think in the end, that would like, in my eyes, probably make like just when you take away the scandal, I think that would be like a crazier mercenary story.
It would be.
The
It would be
Raptors
absolutely crazy. I'm
especially if
just
he
saying,
can't return.
the perception would be like the bubble, where you have one camp of people saying this is the most impressive championship of all time, and then you have this other camp of people saying it's the fakest championship of all time. I think that's what it would be if the Clippers won.
Yeah.
I think you would have people saying, "Oh, it's so impressive. It's amazing that they overcame all of the rumors, investigation, whatever, to win it, and they beat all these great teams, yada yada yada. And then you would have other people saying it's tainted because he cheated. Again, we don't know. We've said allegedly more in this podcast
Yeah.
than I have in my entire life beforehand. You know what else I'm kind of thinking is I kind of can't wait for media day for the Clippers. Now, the Clippers historically, their players don't really speak much. They're a very, I'm not going to say media unfriendly, but they're not a team that like goes out of their way to give the media a lot to work with. But there are a lot of figures in that locker room who I'm going to be very interested to see if they ever speak. Chris Paul was at one time the head of the NBA Players Association, so I imagine he would have some interesting things to say about this. James Harden was once, let's say, infamously involved in this. Isn't I think it technically does fall under the NBA's involved, like their definition of circumvention, but it's not enforceable. He had a quote unquote believed, or it's not, nobody actually knows this, but there's this widespread belief that the 76ers promised him a contract that they didn't ultimately deliver. So, like, he has some, I don't want to say history of circumvention, but like some history of like skirting some of these things. Harden typically doesn't say much to the media, but I'd be interested in what he has to say. So, like, there are a lot of people in that building that, like, I'm kind of just fascinated to have all of these figures involved in this scenario, but I don't think they're going to say much. But it's an interesting group of guys to have going on around this.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that. Will there be any types of players commenting on this? I feel like
No,
I'd
I
be
think
a
the
little...
union will close ranks. The union will not let
Yeah.
anybody say anything.
No,
Is
no, this is not like
my
media day
obvious.
question. So, like, how do you guys feel with all this stuff going? No, you can't ask that.
Yeah. But
Every
it's an interesting thought.
Everybody, make sure to read CBS Sports, see whatever Sam's got coming up.
Ranking uniforms
Follow.
this week.
Oh,
It's
wait, is that
September.
already out? Is
Yeah,
that
I
already out?
ranked today. I ranked all of the uniforms for this season. Tomorrow, I have a different uniform story coming out that I don't want to spoil, but it's a lot more fun. Involves a lot more throwback jerseys, so keep an eye out for that. I'm very passionate about uniforms.
Follow Sam on Twitter at SamQuinnCBS. Subscribe to Third Apron, everybody, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the Substack. A lot of good salary cap analysis coming up on there. Follow me on Twitter at Yossi Goslin, and we'll be back soon for more stuff. Thanks.